Hey, what's up? How's it going? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Gabby, and today I'm going to be doing my August wrap-up. The end of August, which means it's already the end of summer, which means it's fall. No, but seriously, I couldn't be more excited that we're moving into September. It is just amazing. I live for the fall. And August has been quite a great reading month for me. I actually read 15 books in the month of August, and I'm very excited to tell you about them because I rated most of them all very highly. However, before we do jump into the books, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Likewise for sponsoring today's video. And I'm so excited to be working with Likewise because you guys know how much I love finding similarities between books and movies and TV shows. This is the app that does it all for you. Likewise is the best place to share recommendations for books, movies, TV shows, and podcasts. They're powered by a combination of smart technology and real people, and they will give you the best personalized recommendations based on things you've previously liked. I hate that feeling when you're just doom scrolling through Netflix trying to find something to watch, and it's so frustrating because you spend so much time just trying to find something to watch. With Likewise, you don't have to suffer through that because Likewise will recommend you things specifically based on what you've previously liked. You can also create a bunch of different lists, like for example, I've created so many lists for like my favorite thrillers of the year so far, my favorite TV shows, my favorite movies, even my favorite podcasts, and podcasts is the thing that I've found the most recommendations from actually, because I've been looking to get into more like true crime and like spooky podcasts, and because of Likewise, I've recently discovered a number of podcasts that I wouldn't have known about otherwise. For example, OC Swingers and the No Sleep podcast. Wouldn't have never found them if it wasn't for Likewise, and now they're two of my faves. I also recently saw this really great thriller horror movie called I See You, and it was because it was recommended to me on Likewise. It's also really cool because you can ask the community of Likewise for very specific recommendations that you're looking for in things, and somebody can comment and let you know a book that has all of those things. When I discovered this app, I spent hours just going through and liking all of my favorite books and favorite movies and all of that. It's just so much fun. So if you want to get incredible recommendations and support my channel in the process, go to on.likewise.com/gabbyreads and follow the link at the top of my description and download the app today. The best part is that it's 100% free and you can follow me on the app. Click the link in my description and I will see you over there. So yeah, anyways, as I was saying, in the month of August, I did have 15 books that I read and I also had one DNF. I sadly DNF'd Well Met for a second time. I tried to read this book a couple of years ago and I ended up DNFing it about like 50 pages in, and then this time I downloaded the audiobook from my library because I saw that they had it available, so I was like, oh cool. And I don't know if I just like was not in the mood for romance or like what it is, but I ended up DNFing this one around like 100 to 150 pages into it this time. I just can't get into this book for the life of me. I think it's the idea of the Renaissance fair, like I just don't care. But of the 15 books that I did read this month, I had 4 romance novels that I read in the month of August. I had 1 horror kind of question mark, I had 1 magical realism book kind of question mark, and then I had 9 thrillers. So clearly I'm just in a thriller reading mood. I cannot kick this need to read thrillers and I'm fine with it, honestly, it's fine. And I had 4 5-star books this month, which is, you know, pretty high for me. I had 7 4-star books and then only 4 3-star books, so like literally I enjoyed everything that I read this month. I didn't love everything that I read this month, but I had nothing that was like a 2 or 1 star, so like that is a successful reading month in my opinion. I also did have 1 reread this month that was absolutely life-changing, and yeah, I listened to so many audiobooks this month. Like it's beginning to be a problem where I cannot read something unless I'm also listening to it on audio at the same time. I will literally push books that I want to read that month. I will push it back on my TBR if the audiobook is available at my library, because I will put that shit on hold and I will wait until it becomes available so that I can listen to the audiobook while reading the book physically. I can't help who I am. Anyways, I'm gonna stop being dramatic and tell you about the books I read this month. The first book that I read this month was The Falling in Love Montage by Sierra Smith, and yep, you guessed it, I listened to the audiobook through my library. And this is a book that I've been wanting to read for literally forever, probably like over a year now. And this one is a female young adult romance. It is one of the softest cutest things that I've ever read, but also this book made me cry like multiple times while listening to this on audio. We're following these girls, Sorsha and Ruby, and Sorsha is having a pretty hard time because her mom has early onset dementia, and she finds out that there's a pretty good chance that she could also inherit this, so it kind of gives her this look on life like she wants to not really think about her life in the long term and just kind of like live for the moment, which is understandable. This is a romance between her and this girl named Ruby, but she doesn't really want to have something long term with her because of this possibility of this dementia in the future. So she just wants to have like one summer with her. In every rom-com movie, there's like a falling in love montage, and that's always like the best part of the relationship. So they just want to have just the falling in love montage. And it's just really cute and like really sad. I just loved these two characters. I loved their love for romantic comedies. I just thought it was so cute, and they were always talking about like some of my favorite romantic comedies. God, these characters just really got to me, you know? Like, I didn't even think I cared that much when I was listening to this on audio, and then all of a sudden I was just like crying. But yeah, I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars. It was really beautiful. And then I read my first thriller of the month, which was Not a Happy Family by Sherry Lupina. This was actually a book of the month selection for the month of August. I literally, like, as soon as I had this book in my possession, I read it all in like one sitting. I just love Sherry Lupina's thrillers, and this one especially sounded interesting to me because this one is about these 3 adult siblings who are getting accused of murdering their own parents. And the accusations, like, they aren't crazy, you know, because this family, they'd gotten together on Easter, and the kids had never really gotten along well with their parents because their parents just are kind of assholes, and they put all these ridiculous expectations on all of the kids, and they just don't have a very great relationship. And so the dinner ends in a blow-up fight, the kids are leaving, and then the next morning, the parents are found dead, and the parents are also, like, rich as fuck. There's an inheritance for all 3 of these kids, and so any one of them is a suspect, because, like, not only did they not get along, they ended it in a fight, they were the last ones to see them alive, but they also get an inheritance. It is just very shady, and oh my god, this book was so much fun. Like, even though I was able to predict who the killer was, but I still thought that this book was just so much fun to read. It was just so entertaining. It was like a more low-key Knives Out, you know? It wasn't quite up to that scale, it wasn't quite that fun, but it was still just a really great time. I just love Sherry Lupina's writing and her thrillers. Like, her thrillers are just very, you know, entertaining, easy to read, and every single one of these characters is fucked up. I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars. And then I ended up reading All's Well by Mona Awad. This was the first book that I read for a video, like a reading vlog that I did earlier this month, that was like reading some new thrillers, and I thought this was a horror at the time, but it's really not. This book is a lot more of just like a magical realism, like a dark magical realism story. But in this book, we're following this woman named Miranda who suffers from chronic pain, and she's going to be directing this play at the school, and she's just not having a great time, you know? Like, the chronic pain has just made her life nearly unbearable, and I feel like the way the chronic pain was written in this book was just so realistic to the point where it was just frustrating. It was frustrating to read because I was so sad for her to be in this chronic pain, but then I was also frustrated because of the way the other characters and even the doctors in this book would try to undermine her pain or try to make it seem like it was something that was all in her head. Like, it's just very well written in the sense that you will feel like you understand the chronic pain even if you don't, which, you know, I'm not here to say if this is accurate representation or not because I personally don't experience chronic pain. I mean, I do know GERD is a form of chronic pain, but I don't think I have it as bad as some people. But I feel like this book is just, it's so well written in that sense. It really makes you feel her anger and her frustration and her pain, but also, like, I don't really know what this book is. This book is just so incredibly strange. Honestly, I'm just a little bit confused by the ending of this book. Like, I wish I was a smarter person, and honestly, if I had known about the Shakespeare play, like the All's Well play that she's putting on, maybe it would make more sense for me, but I'm not really, like, into Shakespeare plays, and I don't really know much about it, so I feel like that's a part of the reason why this went way over my head. Overall, I really do love the concept of this book, and I do think it's a really, really well-written book. It just wasn't my favorite thing, personally. I ended up giving this 3 stars. And then I read The Perfect Family by Robin Harding. Robin Harding is another one of those thriller authors where I will immediately pick up her new books, even though most of the time they always end up being around, like, a 3-star for me. Like, usually they end up to being just, like, fine. But for some reason, her thrillers are just always, like, I just always want to gravitate towards them and read them. And this one is about this family. We're following these two parents and then these two siblings, a boy and a girl. And their house starts getting trashed by their neighbors, they think. It's like all these kids are like pelting eggs at their house and like throwing gas bombs and like they feel like they're being attacked. Like something is happening in this neighborhood, you know, and it's just very shady. We follow from the point of view of each one of the members in the family, and all of them have some weird shady shit going on that could explain why somebody is targeting them. Robin Harding is so good at writing characters who are just so fucked up. All of her characters are just so messed up, but it makes them so fascinating to read about. And I honestly think this one's probably my favorite Robin Harding out of the ones that I've read so far, because it did end up getting a 4-star from me. So that's pretty good. And then I read The Night She Disappeared by Lisa Jewell. This one was an ARC copy. This one actually does go on sale September 7th, so pretty soon here. And this one, God, I don't even know how to explain what this book is about. This book, we're following in 3 different timelines. We're following in 2016, 2017, and 2018. The main timeline of the book is the year 2017, which is the one in the middle, and it deals with this young girl Tallulah going missing, and we're following from her mom's point of view in that section, and she's trying to figure out what happened to her daughter, because she just went to this party and she never came back, but her daughter has a daughter of her own, like she was a teen parent, and it's totally unlike her to just disappear like this. And then in the 2016 chapters, we follow Tallulah's point of view a year before she went missing. And then in the 2018 chapters' points of view, we follow this other woman who moves onto a property that's like close to where they live, and she's kind of figuring things out a year after the situation. I thought this book, oh my gosh, okay, for the first like 150 pages, it was so slow and boring, and I low-key wanted to DNF it. Like I was just kind of like, what is this? But then, all of a sudden, like, I got so emotionally invested in this story, and by the ending, I was, like, nearly crying, and I just cared so much. Like, I ended up blasting through, like, 200 pages of this book in, like, one sitting, and I just ended up caring about these characters so much out of nowhere. And yeah, so I ended up giving this book 4 stars. It's not one of my favorite Lisa Jewells, but if I had to compare it to another Lisa Jewell, it would actually remind me a lot of Then She Was Gone. I just felt like it had that really similar, like, a mother dealing with her daughter going missing kind of vibe. And then the next book that I read this month was In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, which this was the most unexpected surprise ever, because this is one of my favorite thrillers that I've read this year. It's one of my favorite thrillers that I've ever read. The book is the type of dark academia thriller vibes shit that I just absolutely love. Like, I eat this shit up. 10 years ago, they graduated college, but one of their friends was murdered and another one of their friends was accused of the murder, and now it's like been 10 years and they're going back to the school for like a reunion of sorts. And they're trying to figure out what actually happened with their friends. There's lots of like cheating and drama and gossip, and in this book we not only follow the characters 10 years later, but then we do get flashback chapters to like when they were actually in the school together. And our main character, Jessica, we follow this girl named Jessica. She's the protagonist, and she is just untrustworthy, and she's not that great of a person, and she is just the most interesting person to follow in this book, because you're just like, what? But also, like, there's just, like, genuinely a really good romance in this book happening, too, that I just cared so much about. There was a love triangle. It's really rare that I care about a love triangle, but I did. This book just has so many surprises, and it has so many tricks up its sleeve. It's like you think you know, and then you're like, you don't. You don't. You're like, what? I was just absolutely amazed. And the vibes in this book are just immaculate. If you're looking for those, you know, those dark academia vibes, this is it. Yeah, this was a 5-star. Do I even have to say this is, like, the highest 5 stars? Unlike the next book that I read, which was If the Shoe Fits by Julie Murphy. You know, I'm sad that I didn't love this one as much as I wanted to, because this was one of my most highly anticipated books, because not only is it a cute, like, Cinderella retelling, but it's also based on this, like, show called Before Midnight, which is kind of like The Bachelor, and so she's gonna be on this show that's kind of like The Bachelor, and it's called Before Midnight because it's like a Cinderella retelling. You know, you understand, it's cute. Sadly, this book just ended up being okay for me, and I can't pinpoint what exactly about this book just didn't work for me. I actually ended up downloading this as an audiobook from my library, and I don't know, there was just something about this book that I just never really cared much, I guess, for any of the characters in this book. They just all felt kind of like one-dimensional to me, like, I don't know. And maybe it was because of the fact that it was like a Cinderella retelling that I just felt like I know the story so well that it was just like nothing was very surprising or different. It was just kind of the same thing. I mean, at this point I've read so many different Cinderella and fairy tale retellings that it's like, you know, I just want to see something a little bit different. Like, I don't know. The romance in this book, like, I could not give two shits about this bachelor dude. Like, I don't even know, I can't even remember off the top of my head what his name was. I could not give two shits about him, and then like their romance was just fine. I feel like I'm probably judging this book too harshly though, because I had just read, like right before I read this book, I just read The Charm Offensive, which is another book that kind of deals with this like bachelor-like premise, and I enjoyed that book so much more than this. So I feel like if you're looking for a book that has like a bachelor-like premise, then I would highly recommend The Charm Offensive instead of this one. And I also really enjoyed the book One to Watch a lot more than this one. That one also kind of has a bachelor-like premise, and it also has a plus-size main character. But I don't know, there was just something about this book, I don't know, it was fine, you know, it was just fine, it's forgettable, it was a 3-star. And then next, I actually ended up doing a reread of Him by Serena Bone and Elle Kennedy, because after reading a couple of those romances in a row that just felt like okay to me, I just wanted to remind myself that I like love romance, you know? And so of course I reread one of my favorite romances of all time, and this was actually my 3rd time rereading this book. We don't have to talk about it, but I am such trash for this book. Like, I am trash for this book. I just love Jamie and Wes so much. They're just one of my biggest freaking OTPs ever. And it was just such a joy to get to experience these characters again. Like, this is just one of my god tier romances, you know? I adore Jamie and Wes so freaking much. So this was a 5-star. We don't even have to. And then the next book that I read was Pretty Little Wife by Darby Kane. This is the first book that I ended up reading for a video that I just did called Reading Your Thriller Recommendations. And this was the first of 4 books that I read for that video. We're following this woman who lives in this college town, and a student has recently vanished, and they don't know why. And now her husband is also missing. And it seems like in this small town there's been a lot of people going missing recently, and she doesn't seem too concerned about the fact that her husband has recently gone missing. This book is wild, okay? This book is a crazy ass wild journey. Major trigger warnings for you know, like child molestation and child abuse and different things like that. Like, this book is not easy to stomach by any means. I'll say though, this one was my least favorite out of all of the books that I read for that video, but I still really enjoyed it. Like, this was still a 4-star book, so that just goes to show how much I enjoyed everything that I read in that video. The next book that I read for that video was Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. And this book, oh my god, this is like another one of my favorite thrillers that I've read this year and probably ever. Because in this book, we're following these 2 men, Ike and Buddy. One of them is black, one of them is white. And they find out that both of their sons have been brutally murdered. And their sons were together. They were a gay married couple. And this book is about how these 2 dads are going to go about getting revenge on the people who killed their sons. And it's interesting because both of these main characters, Buddy and Ike, are actually ex-cons themselves. This book really does have it all though, because not only does it have, you know, the really great action, suspense, intense moments, it has some really intense violence, by the way. Like, this book does not hold back on the violence. This is like the most Quentin Tarantino level of violence that I've ever read in a book, okay? Like, it is hardcore. But it also just has really great characters. Like, Ike and Buddy are 2 of my favorite characters that I've ever read about. And they just had really great chemistry, you know, as this duo that's just like leading the story. Like, they were just so interesting to read about. And I do think this book has so many important conversations within it about race, about being gay. I think something that's really interesting about this book is the fact that Buddy and Ike were both not really supportive of their sons being gay. And I think the conversation about that in this book is just so important, because I think there's a lot of people in this world who think the way that Buddy and Ike do at the start of this book, and I just really appreciate the growth that these characters went through in this book. The ending had me bawling. Like, the ending was just so beautiful. Like, oh my god, there were so many moments in this book that made me tear up. This was a 5-star book. This is one of my favorite books that I've read this year. It's probably going to be in my top favorites of the year. And then the next book that I read for that video is Jar of Hearts by Jennifer Hillier. And this is another one that completely blew me away. Like, I never would have read this book if it wasn't for you guys recommending it to me. In this thriller, we're following this woman who, when she was in high school, she unknowingly was dating this guy who was a serial killer named Calvin. But she did know that he actually ended up murdering her best friend and butchering her and cutting her up into tiny little pieces. and she knew about it because right at the start of this book, the opening scene is her getting arrested like 15 years later because she withheld information, and she always knew that he had done that to her best friend and she never said anything. And so this book is 50 shades of fucked up, okay? There's so much shit happening in this book that is so messed up. I also do love in this book, like, we do get a detective point of view in this book, but it's interesting because the detective actually knew the girls when they were in high school, and so he almost like had a crush on like the main protagonist girl, you know? So it's really interesting to get his point of view because it reads less like a detective point of view and more just like he's like their friend and he like wants to know what's going on with them. Wow, this book is just, it's so fast paced and it has so many incredible plot twists, and the ending just had my mouth like hanging open in shock. Like, I could not deal with this shit. And I'm definitely going to be wanting to read more books from this author in the future because this was a 5-star thriller for me. Like, oh my god, third one this month. Woof. And then in that video, I also read Confessions. This one is kind of hard to explain, like, what this book is even about. Basically, it's sectioned into 6 chapters, and in each of the 6 chapters, we kind of get, like, a different perspective on something that's happening. But in the first chapter, we're following this woman who's this teacher, and she's talking to a class full of students, and she's basically saying that she's going to be retiring soon, and then she goes on to explain why she's going to be retiring soon, and then that kind of leads you into this crazy wild shenanigans that is this book. I will say that the writing style itself wasn't personally my favorite just because I found it to be pretty dense and also kind of repetitive at times, because by dense I just mean like it was like pretty bulky, you know, paragraphs were pretty long, like there was not a lot of dialogue to cut it up, so it took me a long time to get through this 200-page book. And also, I do think this book is kind of repetitive at times because, you know, we do get the 6 chapters, but in each of the 6 chapters, we kind of reread some of the same scenes over again from a different point of view. And it's like, even though we do learn new information from each one of these chapters, it did kind of feel repetitive at times to be reading the same thing like over and over and over again. But holy crap, I feel like this plot has got to be one of the most original and unique thriller plots that I've ever read, and I was just like amazed by where this story ended up going. This book has a really, really great plot twist at the end of every single chapter, and at the end of this book, my brain was just like, it was like the gif of like the explosions, like, oh my god, amazing. So yeah, I ended up giving this one 4 stars. And then I ended up reading The Taking of Jake Livingston. This was the buddy read for the book troop for this month, in the month of August. And I will have the live show linked down below. I ended up doing a live show discussing this book with Mayana. But this book is different from all of the other book troop selections that I've had so far because this is the only one that's kind of a young adult selection, and it's also more horror than thriller, kind of, question mark. I was not expecting the high school shooting to have such a huge part in this book as it did. Like, that was kind of like, it just took me off guard. I just don't know how I feel about this. I'm so torn on how I feel about it. I feel like I'm mostly confused about a lot of things in this book because of the whole like death loops and the talk of like time traveling, and just like it was just kind of confusing. It felt to me like it kind of wanted to be like a Donnie Darko type of storyline, but it just didn't quite get there for me. I also just found the writing to be kind of just dull and like not that engaging. And I also didn't really see the purpose of Sawyer's point of view throughout a lot of this book, because if you didn't know, we're following our main character Jake, and then we do get this other guy Sawyer's point of view who was like the school shooter. And for a long time there, I was kind of bored of his point of view. I didn't understand why it was even in the book. But then towards the end, I definitely started to understand why it was there, and I began to actually like his chapters. But overall, I feel pretty lukewarm about this book in general, so I ended up giving this one somewhere between like a 2.5 and a 3 star. I feel so shitty that this book is probably my lowest rated book that I read this whole month. Like, that sucks. Why do I keep doing this to myself with the book troop? Like, why? Next up, I ended up reading Lizzie and Dante by Mary Bly. This is another one that I ended up checking out the audiobook for my library, and I really wanted to read this one before the end of summer because this just looked like the most beautiful ass. I mean, just look at this cover. Just look at it. In this book, we're following this woman named Lizzie who goes on this island vacation because she's running out of time in life, and she meets this guy named Dante who's a chef, and he has a daughter named Etta, and she just finds herself becoming a part of their lives, you know? This book kind of felt like a Nicholas Sparks romance, but like a little bit more tropical, you know? I know Nicholas Sparks books tend to be, you know, set in the South or something like that, but this kind of felt like a Nicholas Sparks book, but set on a beach. I feel like this is one of those books where the author is desperate to make the reader cry and pull on the heartstrings, so for that reason, I feel like I resist when it comes to books like this that are like intentionally set up to make you cry. I don't know, I feel like too, there was something about this book, like I enjoyed it enough, you know, like I think my favorite aspect of this book was actually Lizzie's relationship with his daughter Etta. I thought they had a really cute relationship and really cute bond in this book, and the romance in this book was fine, like I didn't have any issue with the romance at all, but my issue I guess was kind of with like Lizzie's character and the way that she treated her ex. Like there was just something about it that I just didn't really like, or just like kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I just ended up giving this book 3 stars. Like I just recently finished reading this book and I'm already having trouble recalling it, which just lets me know that it just doesn't stand out very much in my memory. Like it's not a very memorable read. Oh my god, can I speak English? The last book that I read this month was For Your Own Good by Samantha Downing, and I did end up reading this book for Kayla's book club, the Literally Dead book club, because this is her August pick and we are going to be doing a live show together because I'm going to be the co-host, and it's probably going to be like early September, I think, for that live show. And this one is a thriller. I love Samantha Downing. I've loved everything that she's come out with so far, so I was very excited to read this book. And in this book, we're following this teacher named Teddy who works at this prestigious private school named Belmont Academy. And at this school, people keep dying. And we're trying to figure out like why and like what the fuck is going on. I don't really want to say more than that because this book is just this crazy ass journey, but oh my gosh, this book really does have some tricks up its sleeve. Like this book has a few surprises and just some really shocking moments, because there were just so many moments where I had no idea where this story was going. Like I could not predict this shit at all. And I feel like that's something I love about Samantha Downing, is that her thrillers tend to be the most like random, hard to predict, just like wild stories, you know? I also really love Teddy as a protagonist in this book. He's one of my favorite protagonists that I've read in a really long time. He reminds me of like Joe Goldberg, you know? He's like one of those like slimy and also very like narcissistic characters that you probably would not be able to stand him in real life, but as a protagonist, he's so fascinating to read about. Like, he just thinks he's smarter than everyone. And yeah, by the ending of this book, my jaw was like on the floor. Like, I just couldn't believe where it ended up going. Yeah, I ended up giving this one 4 stars. And as far as like, if it's my favorite Samantha Downing, like, I don't really know. I would have to think about it, honestly. Alright, well, that is a wrap on my August wrap up. Holy crap. That was a lot of books. That was a lot. I didn't even read that much compared to these like last few months, but I feel like I had so much to say about them. Let me know what you think of this kind of like cozy night setup, you know, because it's actually nighttime right now while I'm filming this, and I don't know how I feel about filming at night, but you know, I feel like as we get towards fall and winter months, it's harder and harder to find time in the sunlight and like get good sunlight in my room. So like, let me know what you think about filming at night and the more like cozy ambiance and like sitting here in blankets and like hanging out with me. Anyways, please let me know, how many books did you read in the month of August? What was the best book that you read in the month of August? What was your least favorite book that you read in the month of August? I think for me, for my favorite book that I read this month, it is a hard tie between In My Dreams I Hold a Knife and Razorblade Tears. Oh my god, those books are god tier. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I will see you very soon with another video. Bye.